Every single piece of music from the original Super Mario Bros. Soundtrack is iconic, with mass exposure far beyond the reach of any other video game soundtrack in history. With such an embarrassment of riches, it can be tough to zero in on one idea for a video like this, but in this video, I want to talk about the Underground theme. Where did this music come from? Why does it work so well? What's up with that weird ending line? What's up with the time signature? Well, let's talk about it. The Underground theme is already so ingrained in your memory that I feel dumb introducing it. I bet you could write this next paragraph of the video for me. It starts with this short motif. 3 notes moving from C to A up to B flat, with each note played and then repeated up an octave. This figure takes up half of each bar, leaving the rest of the bar hanging in silence before the motif repeats itself. We move the whole thing down a fifth, starting on F instead of C, and then we lead into this great twisty chromatic line that closes off the loop. The full bar of silence after that ending line is so perfect. It gives you just enough space to go, "What the hell was that?" before it kicks back up again. If you think about it too hard, it seems like a really bizarre piece of music for a Mario game, far removed from the catchy, joyful melodies that come to mind when you think of our favorite athletic plumber. But remember the context of where this piece appears in-game. Players have just finished bopping around their first ever Mario level, jumping along to an upbeat soundtrack of syncopated rhythms and bouncy major melodies, only to descend into a pipe and come out inside this cavernous underground expanse. The emptiness of the piece, the space left hanging in between statements of that famous motif, emphasizes the new environment, bringing to mind the act of shouting into a cave and hearing an echo calling back to you. The way the main motif repeats each note up an octave, too, evokes the kind of reverberated echo you get with smaller sounds in this kind of space, like your footsteps echoing back at you as you make your way through the cave. This has been discovered for a while now, but the main iconic motif of the Underground theme did originally appear in the track Let's Not Talk About It by Don Grusin, off of a 1979 jazz fusion album called Friendship, featuring some really great players. It's a very different vibe from what we get with our Underground theme, but you cannot deny the resemblance. Listening to this tune back to back with the Mario Bros. Version, it's clear that this melody found its way into Koji Kondo's brain before he worked on this game, whether he meant to take that main bass figure or not. This isn't the only example of Kondo's work being heavily inspired by other sources, but anyone who's tried to write any music has experienced the ego destruction of working so hard on a brilliant, pure expression of your soul, only to be informed that you have, in fact, just rewritten Stairway to Heaven. I don't know how you didn't notice that. It's like the most famous song ever written. I've read in interviews with Koji Kondo that around the time he was writing music for the original Mario and Zelda, he was spending a ton of time listening to this one particular radio station that would play all kinds of different music from all around the world. So it's possible that he heard this tune once on the radio, had that main figure stick in his ear, and forgot where it came from when the time came to put together the Underground theme. Or maybe he deliberately ripped it off. I don't really care. Either way, the value to me in this piece is in the placement of the ideas and how they're used to enhance the game, rather than their originality. The comparison with the original Friendship version is interesting though, because it is also written in 6/4 time. But such a great theme deserves to be reused throughout a series, and as the piece evolved, the time signature changed too. With Super Mario Bros. 3, the Underground theme was straightened out into 4/4 time, with a longer gap inserted in between melodic statements to fit this time signature. The space was also filled in with a funky drum beat, and these changes would carry through to basically every iteration of the theme used throughout the series since. While the funky drums do bring this a little closer to the tune's jazz fusion roots, I think it loses a lot of the cavernous ambience that made the theme work so well for the setting in the first place. I have to say, I'm a 6/4 purist on this one. Okay, but let's get into the real theory nerd meat of this video. What makes this piece so great? First of all, the main motif has this ambiguity to it. C to A to B flat emphasizes the first note as the root note, C, and then we get some push and pull moving between that and the flat 7th that rings out into the void at the end of the figure. But there just aren't enough notes for us to get a clear picture into the tonality being implied. Is this a major chord? A minor chord? A sus chord? It's all up to your imagination, and this ambiguity plays into a feeling of being lost, not knowing exactly where you're going. It's a great contrast to the straightforwardly upbeat music that plays in the overworld levels. Moving from the 1 chord, whatever kind of 1 chord it is, to the 4 chord in bar 3 here is a very strong move too. With each chord featuring its flat 7th, this jump feels reminiscent of blues harmony. And the blues form is so baked into everyone's ears at this point that it makes the music start to make sense. You could take the most discordant, nonsensical groups of notes and rhythms and move it through a blues form and everyone would be able to follow it no problem. Rather than continuing this bluesy form though, the final phrase of the underground theme veers off into a totally different direction. The winding chromatic line that ends off the piece is not taken from any jazz fusion deep cuts. As far as I know at least, this line is all Koji Kondo. It creates this great chaotic quality that plays into the feeling of being lost, wandering around a great underground expanse, and this is due to its seemingly directionless chromaticism. It's a disorienting effect that screeches to a halt at the end. How did Kondo write this line? Well, there is an underlying logic being used here to create the desired effect that we can see if we break it down a little bit. The first 6 notes are jumping from a C to a D to a G and then landing back on a C, with each note preceded by the note a half step above it. E flat moves down to D, A flat moves down to G, and D flat moves down to C. This chromatic motion, which creates clashes within the line itself, obliterates our sense of key and creates a jarring quality, but the underlying structure of C to D to G creates a very natural sounding movement back towards the C that starts the following bar. The 2-5-1 bass line is a very common resolution. The following bar continues the same idea of chromatically approaching notes. Taking just the notes of these strong beats, we see the line moving up from a C to an E to an A flat, outlining a C augmented triad, which by itself would contribute an ambiguous effect. On top of this though, the triplet notes in between approach these notes with 2 chromatic steps down each. We're just doubling up on the same chromatic approach idea that we saw in the last bar. This A-flat pivots to a different tonality, kicking off a quarter note triplet run down an A-flat minor triad, a big step away from our home key of C. But this plays into the general ambiguity of the piece. The chromatic approach notes used are meant to keep us from feeling a strong sense of key, and pivoting here from C to an A-flat minor sound plays into that. We're lost in an underground cave, getting chased into pits by giant turtles. I imagine Mario must be feeling pretty stressed out in these levels. This A-flat minor triad continues running down chromatically from the 3rd to the root to end off the loop, and this transition from an obvious arpeggio into chromatic motion has this great feeling of the whole piece just falling apart on us. If you try playing a major scale or any similarly familiar musical idea and then shift halfway through into just running down a chromatic scale, you'll get the same kind of descending into chaos vibe. Paired with the rhythm slowing down into quarter note triplets, this ending gives the sense that the music is just trailing off rather than coming to some big conclusion, and I think that works perfectly. This is music to stumble through a dark tunnel to. It's an insanely charming piece thanks to the approachability of its ideas, the complexity of its execution, and how well it contributes to the setting it was originally written to capture. May this tune grace our Mario games for generations to come. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did and you want to support the channel, you can do so over at Patreon. I transcribe all of the sheet music you see in these videos myself, and I make it all available to patrons who donate $5 or more per video. So if that interests you, come check it out. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.